So I wanted to talk really quickly about the Hispanic shooter in Texas that murdered those children and the teachers. Apparently, what's so sad about that situation is that the police operated as they did during Columbine. If people remember Columbine, it was a massacre because the police held off and they didn't want to go in and they didn't want to rush the shooters and they didn't want to command the situation and they didn't want to do any of that. Well, we know that's a bad idea now. We know that's a really bad response to an active shooter situation. So what I wanted to point out though was not about that, but more so about how the real heroes in that situation were the Border Patrol Special Tactics team that took out the shooter while the police did nothing, and a migrant farm worker that was the mother of two of the children in the school that went into the school against the police's direction after they had handcuffed her and tried to arrest her. And the reason that this is important to understand is that this woman is apparently now she's on probation for some things, and she's done an interview with CBS, and I'm going to post a link to the interview with CBS News in the description. But the police have told her, because she has some she's on probation from some things a bunch of years ago, and they're starting to try and threaten her if she doesn't shut up about what happened. Well, the problem is the only heroes here are this young woman that's the migrant farm worker that ran into the school to save her children, and also the Border Patrol agents that rushed the shooter and took him out. And this is getting really ridiculous that this is the kind of country that we're living in at this point. Okay, now you don't hear them mentioning the fact that this was a Hispanic shooter. You don't hear them mentioning the fact that most of the victims were Hispanic, if not all of the victims were Hispanic, I believe, but I don't know that for sure. My point is that this has been really, really ridiculous and shows the shortcomings that some of these areas have in the basically in how they respond to crime. And we saw this during the Black Lives Matter insurrection, where police and National Guardsmen were kneeling. They were kneeling to BLM. They were begging BLM. Okay? They were asking forgiveness from BLM. For what? For doing their jobs. The BLM insurrection was an international insurrection, but in the United States it was a national insurrection whereby BLM had attacked a number of targets, including a federal courthouse, had taken over a large chunk of Seattle, had taken over large swaths of area in many cities, and the police did not respond. Okay, National Guard did not respond. Their response was to dance with BLM and to kneel to BLM. If this is how law enforcement is going to deal with criminals, by allowing them to murder children and kneeling to them in the middle of an insurrection, we have to ask ourselves, what is wrong with law enforcement in this country, and how can we revamp the the police departments so that they can act in a more militarized fashion, in a more responsive action to these dangers, whether it be an insurrection, a full-blown insurrection, as it was during the BLM Antifa thing, or whether it's an active shooter in a school, because clearly the police are too aggressive with some individuals and are not aggressive at all when it's situations like an insurrection or an active shooter situation. And this needs to be looked at. This needs to be really looked at, is how can the police nationwide be revamped? And the big thing, I think, is to get rid of this nonsensical Trump criminal justice reform that messed up the police departments, and to go back to the Biden crime bill. And I'm going to leave a link to the Biden crime bill, because that's what we need. We need to make sure that these criminals are taken off the streets, put in prison, and dealt with the way you're supposed to deal with criminals. If you want to do the medical model and the rehabilitation nonsense and all that, prison is an ideal place to do that. But you need to put these people in prison where they belong, so they're not wandering around, blowing people away in a school, or causing a violent insurrection and arson and all this crap like during the BLM insurrection. The police need to be remilitarized. We need a more militaristic police force. We need more prisons, not less. That's the truth. A more militaristic police force and a more aggressive prison system, a bigger, more expensive prison system. If people want criminals to get better, they have to do that in the prison system, not in the public. And that's the bottom line. Check the links in the description.